I never thought my own daughter's wedding would end with me completely destroying her mother's life in front of 200 guests. But sometimes the quiet accountant becomes the most dangerous enemy. My name is Michael Turner. I'm 52 years old, and what you're about to hear will make you question everything you think you know about family loyalty. Before I continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I love seeing where our community spans across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to join us for more stories like this one. And here's the thing. Subscribe if you believe that respect should be earned, not bought. Only people who think money can replace love would scroll past without hitting that button. You see, I spent 17 years raising my daughter Emily as a single father. 17 years of scuffed black shoes at every parent-teacher conference, every soccer game, every piano recital. I was the one who packed her lunches, helped with homework I barely remembered from my own school days, and held her when she cried because her mother never called on her birthday. But on the day that was supposed to be my proudest moment, the day I'd dreamed of since Emily took her first steps, I discovered just how little those 17 years meant to the people I loved most. Because what happened at that wedding, what was written on my chair instead of father of the bride, changed everything. And when I decided how to respond, I realized that Clara, my manipulative ex-wife who abandoned us both, had made one critical mistake. She'd forgotten that accountants are very good at keeping score, and the bill was about to come due. Let me start from the beginning, because understanding how I got to that moment requires knowing who I really am versus who Clara wanted everyone to believe I was. I'm Michael Turner, and for the past 17 years, I've been both mother and father to my daughter Emily. Not by choice, mind you, but because her real mother, Clara, decided that being a parent was too much work when a richer opportunity came knocking. Clara is everything I'm not. Flashy, manipulative, and utterly convinced that money can buy anything, including love. She left us when Emily was just 5 years old for Richard, a corporate lawyer with deep pockets and an even deeper need to impress people. While Clara was building her new life of charity galas and country club memberships, I was the one getting up at 6 every morning to make breakfast, pack lunches, and drive Emily to school in my aging Toyota. I wore the same pair of scuffed black shoes to every parent-teacher conference, every soccer game, every piano recital. Those shoes became my uniform of consistency. They weren't expensive or impressive, but they showed up every single time. Clara, on the other hand, showed up when it was convenient. She'd miss Emily's birthday, but sent an expensive gift a week later with a note about being so busy. She promised to come to the school play and then cancel last minute because Richard had tickets to some exclusive event. I learned to pack tissues in my pocket because I knew Emily would need them when she scanned the audience and didn't see her mother's face. The lonely years were the hardest, not just for Emily, but for me too. Working double shifts at the accounting firm to pay for everything from school supplies to summer camp. Coming home exhausted only to help with math homework that made my brain hurt. Some nights I'd sit in my car in the driveway for 10 minutes, just gathering the energy to be the cheerful dad Emily needed me to be. But here's what kept me going. Emily was worth every sacrifice. When she drew me crayon cards that said best dad ever, when she chose to spend weekends with me instead of going to Clara's fancy events, when she'd curl up next to me on the couch and say, "Dad, I'm glad it's just us." Those moments made every scuffed shoe and every missed meal worth it. Then something shifted when Emily hit her late teens. Suddenly Clara was back, armed with study abroad opportunities and designer clothes. She'd swoop in like some fairy godmother, throwing money at Emily's dreams while positioning herself as the fun mom who made exciting things happen. It hurt watching Emily get pulled into Clara's orbit, but I told myself it was natural for a daughter to want her mother's approval. I kept reminding myself that I was the constant. I was the one who'd been there through everything. Clara could buy Emily's attention temporarily, but 17 years of love and consistency had to count for something, right? When Emily got engaged to David, a wonderful young man who worked as a teacher, I was over the moon. This was the moment I'd dreamed about since she was a little girl asking me to dance with her while standing on my feet. I picture myself walking her down the aisle, giving a heartfelt father of the bride speech, maybe even crying a little as I watched my baby girl start her own family. I was so excited to be part of the wedding planning. I had ideas about flowers, opinions about venues, and I'd even started saving extra money for months to help with expenses. This wasn't just Emily's big day. It was validation of everything I'd worked for. The moment when everyone would see the beautiful, successful woman I'd raised and know that all those years of sacrifice had been worth it. But then something strange started happening. Wedding planning meetings that I wasn't invited to. Group chats about the ceremony where my name mysteriously disappeared from the participant list. When I asked Emily about it, she'd give me these vague reassurances like, "Don't worry, Dad. You'll have a special role too," or "Mom's just handling some of the details." That pit in my stomach grew heavier with each excluded conversation. I started noticing Clara's increased presence and her smugness whenever she was around me. She'd make little comments like, "Well, Michael, I'm sure you'll find your place in all this," with that condescending smile I'd learned to hate over the years. The night before the wedding, I was at Emily's apartment helping her with some last-minute preparations when I overheard Clara on the phone in the next room. She was talking to her cousin, and her voice had that bragging tone she used when she thought she was being clever. "This wedding will finally show everyone who Emily's real family is," she said, practically purring with satisfaction. Michael was just an obligation. An obligation. That word hit me like a physical blow. I stood frozen in Emily's kitchen, holding a box of wedding favors, trying to process what I'd just heard. 17 years of my life reduced to an obligation. All those soccer games, all those late-night conversations about boys and dreams and fears, just something Clara saw as a burden I'd carried out of duty. I tried to dismiss it as Clara's usual cruelty. She'd always been good at finding the exact words that would hurt the most. But deep down, a terrible thought was growing. What if Emily saw me the same way? What if all those years when I thought we were building an unbreakable bond, she was just tolerating my presence until her real family could take over? I barely slept that night, staring at the ceiling and trying to convince myself that Clara was just being her vindictive self. Emily loved me. She had to. We had history that couldn't be bought or manipulated away. The morning of the wedding, I got dressed with nervous excitement. I put on my best suit, the one I bought specifically for this day, and yes, I wore a new pair of dress shoes. Shiny black ones that I'd picked out because I wanted to look worthy of walking beside my daughter. For once, I wanted to look like I belonged in Clara's world of elegance and sophistication. I arrived at the venue early, marveling at how beautiful everything looked. The flowers were stunning. The decorations were tasteful but impressive, and I felt that familiar swell of pride knowing that my daughter was at the center of it all. Guests started arriving, people I'd known for years from our small town, and they all seemed genuinely happy to see me. This felt right. This felt like the culmination of everything I'd worked toward. Emily looked radiant when I saw her getting ready. She was nervous but glowing, and for a moment, all my fears from the night before seemed ridiculous. This was my little girl, grown into this incredible woman, and I was going to walk her down the aisle just like we'd always planned. The ceremony was about to begin, and I made my way to the front section where family was seated. I was looking for my chair, expecting to see father of the bride in elegant calligraphy, ready to take my place of honor for this moment I'd waited 27 years to experience. Instead, I found a nameplate that made my blood freeze in my veins. Not father of the bride. Not even just Michael Turner. Dad by obligation. I stood there staring at those 4 words, feeling like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. This wasn't a mistake. Someone had deliberately, carefully crafted this humiliation. The elegant script, the perfect placement, the way it matched all the other family nameplates. This was planned. People started noticing. I could see guests doing double takes, pointing, whispering to each other. Some were trying to hide their shock. Others were openly snickering. My face burned with shame as the realization hit me. This wasn't just about a nameplate. This was about publicly reducing 17 years of my life to a burden, an obligation, something I'd done out of duty rather than love. I looked across the seating area and saw Clara watching me with that smug smile of victory. She was practically glowing with satisfaction, like she just won some game I never knew we were playing. Richard sat next to her, looking uncomfortable but not intervening. And there, in that moment, I understood exactly what had happened. This was Clara's masterpiece, her way of rewriting history in front of everyone who mattered. She'd finally found a way to diminish everything I'd done, to make me look like the secondary parent who'd just been filling in until the real family could take over. I sat down in that chair, feeling smaller than I'd ever felt in my life. The ceremony began, and Emily walked down the aisle looking absolutely beautiful, but I could barely focus on her. Every toast felt like a dagger. Every laugh sounded like mockery. Every joyful moment was overshadowed by those 4 words that had stripped away my identity as Emily's father. Was this how Emily really saw me? Had she been part of planning this humiliation? The daughter I'd sacrificed everything for, who I'd loved more than my own life. Did she really think of me as just an obligation? The reception was torture. People kept glancing at me with mixtures of pity and awkwardness. Some tried to make conversation, but I could see the question in their eyes. How does a father become reduced to an obligation at his own daughter's wedding? What I'd done wrong? Clara held court at her table, accepting congratulations and praise for the beautiful wedding she'd helped plan. She was in her element, the center of attention, basking in the social victory she'd orchestrated. Meanwhile, I sat on my designated seat, wearing my new dress shoes that suddenly felt as shameful as my old scuffed ones, watching the joy around me blur into background noise. But as the night wore on, something started changing inside me. The initial shock and hurt were hardening into something else, something colder and more calculating. Because Clara had made one critical error in her perfect plan. She'd forgotten that accountants are very good at keeping score. And after 17 years of watching her manipulate and abandon and hurt the people I loved most, the bill was about to come due. I sat there, staring at those 4 words that destroyed everything I thought I knew about my relationship with my daughter. But here's what Clara didn't know about quiet accountants. We're very good at keeping score. And the bill was about to come due. Have you ever been humiliated by someone you trusted? What would you have done in my shoes? Let me know in the comments below. The drive home from that wedding was the longest 20 minutes of my life. I sat in complete silence, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white, replaying every moment of humiliation over and over again. The looks on people's faces when they saw that nameplate. The whispers. Clara's smug smile of victory. And worst of all, the uncertainty about whether my own daughter had been part of orchestrating my public shame. When I walked into my empty house, it felt different somehow, like I was seeing it for the first time. The living room where Emily and I used to watch movies together suddenly felt like a monument to my failure as a father. The kitchen table where we'd done homework for years now seemed to mock me with memories that maybe weren't as precious to her as they were to me. I found myself standing in Emily's old bedroom, staring at the walls covered with photos from her childhood. There she was at 6 years old, gap-toothed and grinning, holding up a drawing she'd made for Father's Day. Another photo of us at her high school graduation, both of us beaming with pride. Had all of that been fake? Had she been counting the days until her real family could take over? The emotional weight hit me in waves. First came the anger, pure, burning rage at Clara for her manipulation and cruelty. She'd spent years perfecting the art of psychological warfare, and that nameplate was her masterpiece. Then came the shame. Deep, crushing embarrassment at being humiliated in front of my entire community. People I'd known for decades had witnessed my reduction to an obligation, and there was no taking that back. But underneath it all was grief. I was mourning the daughter I thought I knew, the relationship I thought we'd built, the identity I'd carried for 17 years as Emily's devoted father. If I was just an obligation, then who was I really? Sleep became impossible. I'd lie in bed replaying every conversation, every moment, trying to figure out where I'd gone wrong. Had I been too clingy? Too involved? Had my constant presence actually been suffocating rather than supportive? The questions tormented me night after night. My appetite disappeared completely. Food had no taste, and the thought of eating felt pointless. Friends started calling, offering gentle inquiries about the wedding, but I couldn't bear to talk about it. I let their calls go to voicemail, each message a reminder that the humiliation was now public knowledge spreading through our small town. The worst part was walking past my home office and seeing all those little awards and certificates Emily had given me over the years. World's best dad, mugs, handmade cards, photos of us at father-daughter events. They all felt like lies now, hollow tokens from a daughter who was just going through the motions until her mother could reclaim her rightful place. Meanwhile, Clara was having her victory lap on social media. Photo after photo from the perfect wedding, with captions about how beautiful everything was, how proud she was of Emily, how wonderful it felt to see her daughter so happy. I noticed that in every single photo, I was either cropped out entirely or positioned on the very edge, barely visible. Even in the pictures where I couldn't be avoided, I looked uncomfortable and out of place. The comments on Clara's posts made my stomach turn. Her friends praising her strength in dealing with difficult family dynamics and congratulating her on finally getting the recognition she deserved as Emily's mother. The narrative being spun was clear. Clara had always been the real parent, and I was just some secondary figure who'd been in the way. For about 2 weeks, I wallowed in this misery. I went through the motions of work, came home, and stared at the walls. But then something started shifting in my brain. Maybe it was my accountant's mind finally kicking into gear, but I began thinking about Clara's behavior differently. This wasn't the first time she'd manipulated a situation to make herself look better and someone else look worse. This was a pattern. I started remembering things. How she'd twisted the story of our divorce to make it sound like she'd been the victim of my controlling behavior. How she'd managed to paint herself as the abandoned mother rather than the woman who chose money over her child. How she'd swooped back into Emily's life with perfectly timed gifts and opportunities that made my steady presence look boring by comparison. That's when I realized Clara hadn't just hurt me. She'd hurt other people too. And if I was going to understand what I was really dealing with, I needed to start investigating. The phone call from Emily came on a Tuesday evening. I've been avoiding her calls for almost 3 weeks, but when I finally answered, I could hear the discomfort in her voice immediately. "Dad," she said, and there was something rehearsed about her tone. "I wanted to talk to you about the wedding, about the nameplate thing." I waited, giving her space to explain herself. "Mom thought it would be funny," she said, and I could practically hear the script Clara had given her. You know how she has that weird sense of humor sometimes? She said it was like an inside joke, because you always say parenting is about obligation and duty, not just feelings. That's when it hit me. Emily wasn't calling to apologize. She was calling to manage the situation, to smooth things over with the explanation Clara had crafted. My own daughter was actively participating in gaslighting me about my own humiliation. "Emily," I said quietly, "do you really think 17 years of raising you was just an obligation to me?" The pause was too long. When she finally answered, her voice was smaller. "No, Dad. Of course not. It's just complicated. Complicated." That one word told me everything I needed to know. Emily had chosen sides, and it wasn't mine. The final crack in my heart somehow made me stronger rather than weaker, because now I knew exactly what I was dealing with, and I could stop hoping for something that was never going to come. After I hung up, I sat at my computer and started doing what I do best, digging into details and following paper trails. I began with social media, going back through years of Clara's posts, looking for patterns. What I found was fascinating. Clara had a public persona that was carefully crafted, but if you knew how to look, you could see the cracks. There were photos from family events where other people looked uncomfortable or unhappy in the background. Comments on posts that seemed supportive on the surface but had underlying tension. References to difficult situations and challenging family dynamics that painted Clara as the long-suffering victim of other people's problems. I started reaching out to people from our past, mutual friends from before the divorce, neighbors from when we were married, even some of Clara's own extended family members. What I discovered was a pattern of behavior that went back decades. Clara's own sister admitted that Clara had tried to manipulate their mothers well before she died. A former neighbor told me about how Clara had spread rumors about another family on their street when she felt they were getting too much attention. Even Richard's business partner mentioned some concerning incidents where Clara had interfered in professional relationships. The financial investigation was even more revealing. Using my professional skills and some legal databases, I discovered that Richard's law firm had been involved in several ethically questionable cases. Nothing criminal, but definitely situations where they'd bent rules to benefit wealthy clients. I also found evidence that Clara had lied about her financial situation during our divorce, hiding assets that should have been disclosed. But the most damning evidence came from the wedding vendors themselves. When I carefully reached out to the photographer, the caterer, and the wedding planner, I heard stories that made my blood boil. Clara had been consistently rude and demanding throughout the planning process. She'd made cruel comments about me to multiple vendors, including jokes about how pathetic it was that I thought I was important to Emily's life. The photographer actually apologized to me. She said she'd been horrified by the nameplate and had considered saying something but didn't want to cause drama at the wedding. Several vendors mentioned that they'd never work with Clara again, describing her as the most difficult and entitled client they'd ever encountered. As I gathered all this information, something remarkable started happening. I discovered that my reputation in the community was actually much stronger than I'd realized. The people who witnessed my humiliation at the wedding weren't laughing at me. They were outraged on my behalf. They'd seen 17 years of my dedication to Emily, and they knew quality when they saw it. Mrs. Henderson from down the street stopped by to tell me how disgusted she'd been by that nameplate. The principal from Emily's elementary school called to express his support, mentioning how he'd always admire my involvement in Emily's education. Even some of Clara's own acquaintances were quietly expressing their disapproval of what had happened. I realized that respect isn't something that gets written on nameplates at weddings. It's something you earn through years of consistent actions, and I'd been earning it without even realizing it. Clara might have won one battle, but she'd badly miscalculated the war. That's when the plan started forming in my mind. Clara's greatest strength was her ability to manipulate social situations and control narratives. But it was also her greatest weakness, because it meant she was completely dependent on other people's approval and admiration. Her worst fear wasn't financial loss or legal trouble. It was public humiliation and social rejection. I began reaching out to everyone Clara had wronged over the years, building a network of people who had their own scores to settle. Her sister who'd been cheated out of inheritance money. The neighbor whose reputation had been damaged by Clara's rumors. Former friends who'd been discarded when they were no longer useful. Even some of Richard's professional contacts who'd been made uncomfortable by Clara's behavior. What surprised me was how eager people were to help once they understood what I was planning. Clara had made a lot of enemies over the years, and many of them had been waiting for someone to finally hold her accountable. I started a subtle campaign on social media, not attacking Clara directly, but simply sharing positive stories about my relationship with Emily over the years. Photos from school events, screenshots of old text messages where Emily had expressed her love and gratitude, testimonials from teachers and coaches who remembered my dedication. I wasn't trying to tear Clara down. I was building up the true story of who I was as a father. The response was overwhelming. Community members started sharing their own memories of seeing me at Emily's events, their observations of my character, their appreciation for the kind of father I'd been. The narrative was slowly shifting, and Clara was starting to notice. She began making defensive posts on her own social media, talking about how some people try to rewrite history and how proud she was of always putting Emily first. But the more defensive she became, the more obvious it was that she was losing control of the story. Emily called me again, sounding more stressed this time. She'd started seeing the posts and comments, and she was beginning to understand that public opinion wasn't lining up with the version of events Clara had sold her. She asked me to stop making drama and to just let things go back to normal. But there was no going back to normal. The truth was coming out, and Clara was getting desperate. Richard actually tried to intimidate me legally, sending a formal letter warning me about harassment and defamation. It was clearly Clara's idea, but it backfired spectacularly. The legal threat just confirmed to everyone that they were scared of what I might reveal, and it made people even more curious about what Clara was trying to hide. There were moments when I doubted myself. Late nights when I wondered if I was going too far, if revenge was really worth it. But then I'd remember that nameplate the years of manipulation, the way Clara had tried to erase 17 years of my love and sacrifice. This wasn't just about getting even, it was about reclaiming the truth. I'd spent months carefully building my case, gathering my allies, and positioning all the pieces on the board. The perfect opportunity was coming up, Clara's 50th birthday party. She'd been planning it for months, a lavish celebration designed to showcase her social status and success. All the same people who'd witnessed my humiliation at the wedding would be there. Clara thought she had won by humiliating me in front of everyone who mattered. But she made one critical mistake. She underestimated the power of a man who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The trap was set, and she was about to walk right into it. Do you think family members who betray you deserve forgiveness, or should they face consequences? Let me know what you think in the comments. I read every single one. Clara's 50th birthday party was going to be the event of the season. She'd been planning it for months, sending out elegant invitations to everyone who mattered in our community. The venue was the same upscale country club where Emily's wedding reception had been held. Ironic, considering what was about to happen. I knew this was my moment. The same people who had witnessed my humiliation would be there, watching Clara bask in what she thought would be her ultimate social triumph. She'd be surrounded by admirers, completely confident in her position as the town's most sophisticated socialite. She'd never see it coming. I arrived early, dressed in my best suit, not to impress anyone, but because I wanted to look worthy of the moment I'd been planning for months. My network of supporters was already in place. Clara's sister had agreed to help, along with several former friends who were tired of her manipulation. Even the wedding photographer was there, ready to document what was about to unfold. Clara looked stunning when she made her entrance, wearing an expensive dress that probably cost more than I made in a month. She was radiant with confidence, working the room like the social queen she believed herself to be. Richard stood beside her, playing the role of the devoted husband, though I could see the strain in his eyes. My investigation had shown him exactly what kind of woman he'd married, and it was eating at him. About an hour into the party, I asked for everyone's attention. Clara looked pleased, assuming I was going to give some gracious toast acknowledging her importance. She had no idea what I'd actually prepared. I wanted to take a moment to honor Clara tonight. I began, and I could see her practically glowing with anticipation. I've put together a little presentation that really captures who she is and the impact she's had on all our lives. The lights dimmed, and I started what appeared to be a heartfelt tribute video. The first few slides showed Clara at various social events, looking glamorous and successful. But then the tone shifted. Clara has always been someone who knows exactly how to get what she wants, I continued. And the next slide showed a screenshot of her social media post from the wedding, with her smug caption about the perfect family celebration. Then came the audio recording. Clara's own voice, crystal clear, talking to her cousin the night before Emily's wedding. This wedding will finally show everyone who Emily's real family is. Michael was just an obligation. The room went dead silent. You could hear people's sharp intakes of breath, the uncomfortable shifting in chairs. Clara's face went white as she realized what was happening, but I wasn't finished. The next slides showed financial documents, evidence of how she'd lied during our divorce, hiding assets that should have been disclosed. Then came testimonies from the wedding vendors, describing her cruel behavior and the hateful comments she'd made about me behind the scenes. The floors wanted you all to know that Clara referred to me as that pathetic man who thinks he matters, I said, my voice steady and calm. The photographer heard her laughing about how humiliating that nameplate would be for me. Social media screenshots appeared on the screen. Posts where Clara had subtle manipulated situations to make herself look like a victim, always at someone else's expense. Years of calculated cruelty, all documented in her own words. But the most damaging evidence was the pattern. I traced her behavior back decades, showing how she manipulated family members, spread rumors about neighbors, and betrayed friends whenever it served her purposes. This wasn't just about me. This was about a lifetime of using and discarding people. Clara tried to interrupt, her voice shrill with panic. This is ridiculous. Michael's just bitter about the divorce. You can't believe. Actually, Clara's own sister stood up from the back of the room. We can believe it, because we've all experienced it. She began sharing her own story about how Clara had tried to manipulate their dying mother's will, attempting to cheat her siblings out of their inheritance. One by one, other people started speaking up. The neighbor whose reputation Clara had destroyed with false rumors. Former friends who'd been discarded when they were no longer useful. Even some of Richard's business associates who shared stories about Clara's inappropriate behavior at professional events. Emily was sitting at the front table, her face cycling through emotions, shock, denial, and finally, devastating recognition. This was her mother's true character being revealed, and she couldn't deny what she was hearing and seeing. Richard looked like he was going to be physically sick. His law firm's reputation was everything to him, and he was realizing that his wife's behavior could destroy his career. I almost felt sorry for him, almost. The social ostracism was happening in real time. I could see Clara's so-called friends exchanging glances, whispering to each other, physically distancing themselves from her table. The woman who had been holding court just minutes earlier was suddenly radioactive. Clara made one last desperate attempt to regain control. "You're all being manipulated by a bitter ex-husband," she screamed. "This is just his pathetic attempt at revenge." That's when I played my final card. Another audio recording, this one from just 2 weeks earlier. Clara talking to one of her friends, laughing about how stupid the people in our town were, how easy it was to manipulate them, how she'd always looked down on the community that had welcomed her. The room erupted. People who had considered Clara a friend were now seeing exactly what she really thought of them. The mask hadn't just slipped, it had been completely torn away. Mrs. Henderson, the sweet elderly woman who lived down the street from me, stood up with tears in her eyes. "Michael," she said, her voice shaking with emotion, "I am so sorry we didn't speak up at the wedding. What she did to you was unconscionable, and we should have said something." Others began apologizing too. People who had witnessed my humiliation and said nothing were now expressing their outrage and support. The same community that had watched me get publicly shamed was now lifting me up with genuine affection and respect. Clara's perfect facade was crumbling in front of everyone. She tried to storm out dramatically, but the damage was done. The truth was spreading through the room faster than she could control, and I knew it would be all over social media within hours. Richard followed her out, but not to comfort her, to distance himself from the wreckage. Within a week, I heard he'd filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and concerns about his professional reputation. The irony was perfect. Clara had spent years making other people feel like obligations in her life, treating them as disposable tools to be used and discarded. Now she was the one becoming an obligation that no one wanted to fulfill. Emily came to see me 3 days later. She sat in my living room, the same room where she used to do homework at the kitchen table, and she cried. Really cried, like she hadn't since she was a little girl. "Dad," she said, her voice breaking, "I'm so sorry. I was so stupid. I let her convince me that money and fancy things mattered more than everything you did for me." I held her while she sobbed, this grown woman who was my little girl again. She told me how Clara had spent years subtly undermining my relationship with Emily, making little comments about how I was holding her back or too simple to understand her needs. It had been a slow, calculated campaign to steal my daughter's love, and it had almost worked. The nameplate wasn't Mom's idea, Emily confessed. It was mine. She suggested it, but I thought it would be, I don't know, sophisticated somehow. Like we were acknowledging that family is complicated. I didn't realize how cruel it was until I saw your face that day. That revelation hurt, but it also explained everything. Emily hadn't been just a victim of Clara's manipulation. She'd been a willing participant, seduced by the idea that she could be part of her mother's sophisticated world. But seeing Clara's true character exposed had forced her to confront some uncomfortable truths about herself too. "I chose surface over substance," she said. "I chose money over love. And I almost lost the best father any girl could ask for." Our relationship didn't heal overnight, but it did heal. Emily started coming around more often, asking about my work, my life, my feelings. For the first time in years, We had real conversations instead of the polite small talk that had replaced our close bond. She also set firm boundaries with Clara. No more manipulation, no more attempts to undermine our relationship, no more using Emily as a weapon against me. Clara, now isolated and desperate, actually tried to comply for a while, but old habits die hard. Eventually, Emily cut contact altogether. The community response was overwhelming. People who had watched my quiet dedication to Emily over the years were now vocal in their support and admiration. I received invitations to events, offers of friendship, and a level of respect that felt genuine and earned. I started wearing my old scuffed black shoes again, but now with pride instead of shame. They represented something Clara could never understand: consistency, reliability, and love that doesn't depend on external validation. Clara's social isolation was complete within months. Her so-called friends abandoned her one by one as the truth about her character spread. She tried to reinvent herself in a different social circle, but her reputation followed her. In our small town, word travels fast, and no one wanted to risk being her next victim. The deeper truth I learned was something Clara never understood. Love isn't about grand gestures or expensive gifts. It's about showing up every day, even when it's hard, even when no one notices, even when you're wearing scuffed black shoes because you spent your money on your daughter's needs instead of your own appearance. Consistency and sacrifice build real relationships. Manipulation might work in the short term, but it always backfires eventually because it's built on lies, and the truth has a way of surfacing. I also learned that sometimes the quiet person really is the most dangerous enemy. Not because we're plotting or scheming, but because we're watching. We see patterns, we remember details, and we understand that patience combined with truth is more powerful than any manipulation. Emily's growth has been remarkable to watch. She apologized not just to me, but to herself for the person she'd allowed Clara to turn her into. She recognized that while she'd been manipulated, she'd also been complicit in hurting someone who loved her unconditionally. She chose substance over surface for the first time in her adult life, and our relationship is now stronger than it ever was. She calls me regularly, visits often, and when she talks about her childhood, it's with appreciation for the sacrifices I made rather than embarrassment about what we didn't have. The final irony is that Clara's attempt to rewrite history backfired completely. She thought she could diminish 17 years of love and dedication with one cruel nameplate, but instead, she created the catalyst that revealed the truth about both of us. My story is now being told by everyone. The real story of a father who gave everything for his daughter, not because it was an obligation, but because it was love in its purest form. That nameplate that was meant to diminish me became my origin story, the moment I decided to stop being quiet about my worth. Clara thought she was showing everyone who Emily's real family was, and she was right. Just not the way she intended. She proved that real family isn't about blood or money or social status. It's about the people who show up when life gets hard and love you even when you're not perfect. I learned that day that you can't buy respect, you can't manipulate love, and you can't rewrite 17 years of truth with one cruel nameplate. The quiet accountant had proven that patience and strategy beat flash and manipulation every single time. Sometimes the person who seems the weakest is actually gathering strength for the perfect moment to strike. Have you ever had someone underestimate you? Share your story in the comments below. If this story taught you anything about the power of patience and truth, make sure you're subscribed for more stories like this. And remember, the quiet ones are always watching.